Let's talk right now to former Conservative Party leader, still MP, Sir Iain Duncan Smith. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julie.
Thank you very much for joining us. I'm putting the question to you that I've been putting to our audience and just had a right old ding-dong with Peter, one of our callers. Who do you trust most on Ukraine? Is it Donald Trump, President Zelensky or President Putin?
At the end of the day, it's got to be Zelensky because it's Ukraine that's been invaded. America hasn't been invaded, and Russia wasn't invaded, but it invaded Ukraine. So by a process of simple elimination, we have to stand with Zelensky. I listened to your caller earlier on. He said, you know, Churchill didn't get around. Actually, Churchill flew everywhere during the war.
Did he? I had thought he might have done, but I wasn't sure enough, so I didn't want to say.
I can tell you straight off, 4 or 5 times to America to plead for money and equipment. He had joint meetings with Stalin and with Roosevelt in a whole variety of places. He had more air miles than all the other leaders put together, and then some. And he had double pneumonia at one point. He had a heart attack whilst in the United States, quietly kept from the British public. He was as tough as old boots, but without that, without rallying support, without bringing everybody together, we would have lost the war.
Really, it's so good to have that information, because this is the thing, is that I'm fascinated in the last week by the lines, the things that Donald Trump has said. Oh, he's a dictator. He wasn't elected. But also, like, you know, all these talking points about, you know, swanning around, doing a Vogue cover. Yep. You can see where this stuff is coming from. That this guy is a fake. He's after something else. Zelensky called his bluff yesterday, didn't he? By simply saying,
he did.
I will stand down. I will stand down.
Yeah.
If you can give me peace and NATO membership to guarantee that peace, I'll stand down. But do you think that bluff will be called back?
No, I think the reality, though, is for President Trump. I understand what he's doing at the moment. He came in wanting to get out of Ukraine, and they also want to cut defence spending, but focus more to the Far East. I understand that. Europe's got to do more, and we are to blame the countries of Europe for not having stepped up on defence enough. Although Europe has outspent the United States when it comes to Ukraine, which is a simple fact. However, the important thing here is I think he's got it wrong with Putin. He thinks that a bit of territory for Putin and an absolute guarantee of no NATO membership will be enough for Putin. It won't be. Putin isn't interested in territory. He's interested in sovereignty. He believes that he must recreate the boundaries of the old Soviet Union. He hated the idea of Ukraine becoming a country after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the Cold War. And he has been determined ever since to absorb it back into Russia, and also because of the huge amount of minerals, and also the fact that they grow huge amounts of wheat, which is exportable to the rest of the world. He wants all that back, and he won't stop until he's got it. So if he has a short peace, which is what's being proposed, he will be back again after having reconstructed his armed forces, and Ukraine will not exist, and they will be going from a democracy to an autocracy, and we will have condemned them to that. It's as simple as that. They're wrong on their reading of Putin.
Yeah, this is the thing. Why do you think that Donald Trump has got Putin so wrong? We know he likes a strong man. We know that. You know, he's always, you know, whether it's, you know, Viktor Orban or Erdogan, or, you know, he seems to sort of love these figures, but he seems to be particularly admiring of Vladimir Putin. But I mean, his reading of Vladimir Putin doesn't seem to tally with literally anyone else who's sane and who's paying attention to the details. Why do you think that is? Lots of people are saying, no, Putin's got compromat on him, that there's some deal between the two. I'm never a conspiracy theorist, but I can't think of any other explanation.
No, it's not that. He likes to deal with strong leaders. Strong leaders tend to be, for the most part, totalitarians. So they can govern because they don't have to have elections. And he likes that because he thinks that they make decisions, and he prides himself on him making decisions. I think in a way, what you've got to understand with Trump is that he wants to end the war, and he wants to do it quickly. And he thinks that these offers will be enough to get Putin over the line. They won't be. Putin's an old KGB man. What he'll do is go, great, thank you very much indeed. Yup, we're going to go for peace. And at the last moment, what they'll go, which they've already done, by the way, in Saudi. Well, yeah, hang on, no European peacekeepers. That's another no-no. And each time they'll come up with just a little more, because he knows that Trump is in a hurry. And when you're negotiating with someone in a hurry, the best thing you can do is just slow it down, because eventually their frustration will mean they will agree to almost anything to get you out the door. And that's what's going to go on with this. So I understand why Trump wants to do this and wants to put the speed on it. But I think the problem right now is that Putin is smarter in this regard, and there's nothing that the KGB don't do but to get their own interest across whenever they're
absolutely. But also in that start of negotiations, Mr. Art of the deal, he's given away, you know, OK, they won't have NATO membership, we're not going to fund them anymore, and I've run my election on the basis we're going to get peace, we're going to get it quickly. Well, I mean, you've literally given away all of your negotiating points straight away. I mean, given Putin the upper hand. In terms of Europe right now, I mean, European leaders, Canadian leader, many other representatives there over in Ukraine right now, everyone's saying all the right things. But one thing Donald Trump has been right about all along, back in his first term as well, you know, Europe has not been stepping up in the last many decades in terms of supporting its own defence and its own and paying for it. And let's put more money into the NHS and the welfare state, but not, and then expect American taxpayers to fund our defence. So he's been quite right on that. But Keir Starmer,
that's the one thing I agreed with Vance about. When Vance came out and did a bit of a rant, but he said basically Europe has caved in to wokeism and to welfare. And that's true. The trouble is for the UK and other countries is that we haven't sorted our economies out. Now, all parties are to blame for this, but the key thing is we do need to have defence spending, I think, actually at a minimum of 3%.
Well, I was going to ask you, because we're at 2.3% now, and that includes things like defence pensions. I'm sorry, as important as they are, they ain't helping us with our war effort today. Talk about getting it up to 2.5%. We know even Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, apparently is giving in to there is going to have to be this extra cost. We have money to give to, you know, the Mauritians to take the Chagos Islands off our hands for some reason, tens of billions there, but we don't have money for defence. But realistically, 2.5%, even 3%, doesn't touch the sides of the need.
No, it isn't. And I know that what America wants them to do is to move to 5%. Now, we did go to 5%. We went to 5% during the Cold War when Thatcher and Reagan worked together. And this is my main point. I wrote an article about it today. I said, if Keir Starmer wants to play any role at all, it's very important that he now recognises that he has to get alongside Trump, not for any personal reasons, but because when the UK and the US are together, the world is a safer place. When we are parted from each other, the world is less safe. And we've seen it endlessly from Vietnam right the way through. When we don't agree with each other and America goes off on its own or does something, what happens is the world falls into a greater level of threat. So he's got to get, when he goes over there to Washington, and say to him, look, remember Reagan and Thatcher. Thatcher helped you get Europe up to 5% defence spending and also stand off against the Russian deployment or the Soviet deployment of SS-20s and force them to back down. And that was done because we worked together over it. He's got to try and explain to Trump that the real problem with Ukraine is not an isolated issue. Ukraine is part of this drive by this axis of totalitarian states to govern more and more of the world. Xi is the key behind all of this with the money, right? Russia isn't the Soviet Union anymore, but Xi backs them. And so what happens if Ukraine goes down, then Taiwan will be next. Why Taiwan is important to us? Well, I'll tell you why. Because the hit from the Russian invasion of Ukraine was about $1 trillion to the world economy. Any takeover or blockade of Taiwan will cost $10 trillion minimum. 72% of everything produced in the world is produced in the area of the South China Seas, China and Taiwan. Anything that crashes that, the whole world goes down.
And crucially, the high tech, I mean, it's
exactly.
And
he needs to recognize, Trump needs to recognize, you cannot just swipe Ukraine off the map. Because if you do, Xi's watching and he will say, of course, they'll never stand up for Taiwan. We're in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Again, I had high hopes that that Donald Trump would change his tune once he got into office. Those have been cruelly, cruelly dashed, and I feared they would be. Sir Iain Duncan Smith, I so appreciate you joining us.